Despite very significant improvements in the early years sector in the past decade, one thing hasn't changed. The layout in most settings follows conventional wisdom. Children's artwork is proudly displayed. There's lots of colourful plastic. Surfaces are packed with activities. It's a busy and stimulating environment. Now, though, there's an opposite and challenging view. And it's advice that some practitioners will find surprising.
Make sure that an environment isn't too cluttered. Also that the environment isn't overstimulating. That's really, really important that we consider the impact that excessive displays hanging from absolutely everywhere can actually have on a child's, it's almost like a sensory overload for them.
The new idea that the traditional layout of settings could be overstimulating and distracting for pupils is already proving controversial. One prominent head teacher has criticised the ideas. And later in the programme, David Fan and the report's author, Elizabeth Jarman, meet to discuss their differences.
You may find this the wrong colour, you may find it overstimulating, but as a head teacher, this is what I want and this is what I believe in.
I have to say that this report is certainly not encouraging people to have dull classrooms.
Right.
If we're wanting an environment that the children interact with, if we want an environment that is celebrating the children's work, I personally like to see the children involved in that.
Hey, I got one here. Get one. Yeah? Abby, give me a foot like this.
Bring them across to the wishing well because we're going to make...
Whilst there's widespread consensus that improvements to speaking and listening skills are required, the proponents of the new ideas accept that this means of achieving it, a fundamental rethink of layout, will be challenging.
It's very new, quite innovative, and although we found some brilliant examples of excellent practice, we are challenging what most people might have thought for the last quite a number of years.
The Basic Skills Agency, which has commissioned research into the learning environment, is keen to emphasise that new approaches to layout are being proposed for educational, not merely cosmetic reasons. Studies show that up to half of all children entering primary schools have difficulties with speaking and listening skills.
I think the reason it's become such a hot topic is because increasingly people are concerned about the limited language skills and the limited listening skills that many young children seem to have when they come to nursery, to preschool, and then when they go off to primary school.
There's this famous phrase from a researcher called James Britton ages ago now, who said that reading and writing float on a sea of talk. So in other words, if children find it difficult to talk and hard to listen, they're going to find it very hard to acquire the basic skills of literacy and numeracy as well.
So what we need to do is to make people aware of this difficulty and make people aware of the potential for it all to go wrong, and then we can make sure that local authorities and health authorities are working together to make sure to maximise each child's potential.
The new approach aimed at improving speaking and listening skills is called communication-friendly spaces, and improvements to layout are a big part of the initiative.
It's very important that when we're thinking about what a communication-friendly space looks like, that we really think about things from the child's perspective and that we really have that as a central consideration. You know, that I think it's important for practitioners to almost walk around their setting at a child's height to really understand what the child is seeing.
Research shows that traditional strong primary colours may overstimulate children. Harsh strip lighting may not contribute to a good learning environment. Children react well to the availability of small, intimate spaces within a classroom, allowing them to initiate their own conversations.
Abby, do you have a fairy suit at home? Yeah, because to just fly around in the sky. Yeah.
It's also very important that there are cosy areas where children can withdraw to.
How do you kick the hedgehog?
It's really important as well to maximise the use of space in an environment, to really use every nook and cranny that's available.
And plenty of neutrals, both in furnishings and fabrics, allow children's work to be displayed without visual distraction. Settings can become polluted by noise, say the researchers. And quiet areas are essential to improve speaking and listening.
An excessively noisy environment is not going to be conducive, for instance, for a child who's really trying to listen to a speech sound.
The proposals on transforming the traditional look of settings are based on evidence gathered from academic studies around the world.
We were aware of all sorts of research that has been done, mainly in the States, it has to be said, into how the environment affects the way children learn. But we couldn't find anything that anybody had done that brings all that research together and shows what it looks like in a setting. So this work has been developed to try and put that research into practice and help people to find out what it might look like.
One setting which is adopting some of the ideas to encourage the development of speaking and listening skills is Trimdon Grange Nursery and Infant School in County Durham. Trimdon's head teacher has had a long-standing interest in classroom layout and the use of outdoor spaces. Such was her enthusiasm for new thinking in the area that some of her staff went to Italy to look at schools using an approach called the Reggio model. It shares many of the principles which underpin communication-friendly spaces.
Their key impression of Italy was that everything was spacious, calm, well organised, uncluttered, and the background faded away, leaving the children's achievements in the foreground. So one of the first things that happened was a lot of furniture went into storage or went into a skip, and we made ourselves a much larger, more spacious kind of environment for the children. We looked at some of our equipment that was very brightly coloured and decided that we wanted to take a change of emphasis, and we slowly began to replace some of our very brightly coloured plastic equipment with as many natural materials as we could. So we went for an effect that was light. We used wood, we used hessian, we used very pale walls in the background.
Whilst the classrooms at Trimdon Grange may not look quite as decluttered as the purists would like, they do look different from traditional classrooms, and the differences do transfer to how the pupils learn, according to the head.
Well, the environment is a provocation, I suppose. The environment is there to encourage children to come forward with ideas, to look for things to investigate, to look for opportunities for creation. And our environment, and any environment which follows a Reggio model, is always going to have plenty of opportunities for pupil independence. And the activities and the areas which are laid out within it are going to be as open-ended as possible, so children can respond in as many ways as they can, according to their interests, according to their strengths, and according to the children that they're playing with.
What's happening to the glitter?
Falling down.
It's falling down. Is it making a nice pattern? What colours is it? What colours can you see?
Olivia, I'm over here. Silver.
Silver.
And pink.
Very nice.
So the environment is there for children to take their learning forward and adults to make the sensitive interventions according to the way that the children react to the environment.
So today I'm going to watch what you do, write down what you say, and then we'll share it all together. And I want you to think, next time I do that, Mrs. Richardson, I'd like to do this. Or next time, Mrs. Richardson, I'd like to do that.
The new thinking about learning environments also focuses on the importance of outside spaces and their capacity for providing challenge and stimulation, which improves pupils' speaking and listening skills. Again, the head teacher sent her staff out to scour the world for ideas. This time they went to Denmark to look at the country's famous forest schools.
In the forest schools, the staff were immediately struck by the fact that children hardly ever went indoors at all. And it was also in Denmark, where it was very cold. So any excuses that we can't go outside because it's cold were soon swept to one side. And in fact, in those schools, the children's education was almost entirely outside. It was very free-ranging, there wasn't an obviously structured curriculum, and staff responded to children's interests with small areas of provocation, but there was a much greater confidence in children's ability to keep themselves safe outside as well, not the preoccupation with health and safety that you sometimes see in schools in this country. And that was quite liberating. That was quite liberating because we saw that those children were safe, and yet they were able to take calculated risks with the support of adults. And I think when the staff returned here and wanted to do some more daring things outside, if you like, some more exciting and stimulating things, they felt empowered to do it.
Oh, I fell out again.
We also found ourselves more confident to take risks with very messy materials. So we began to use gloop and mud and hose pipes, and we invested in clothing that was going to keep the children safe and dry, and decided we would just go with it because the learning opportunities were so powerful that what's a little bit of mess compared to a huge conceptual gain.
Where does the brick go, Josh? Good boy. Onto the mortar. Clever boy. Press it down. Now, what did Mr. Ramsey do with the end of his trowel? You remember? He went... Good boy, do you want to help her?
But changes of this order cost money. Catherine Wharton estimates she spent £25,000.
Well, the changes in the building have all been financed from within normal school budget. So we haven't had any additional funding, although we have done the same kind of fundraising that most schools would do. But the real quality equipment is expensive. There's no way around it. It's worth the investment, but you just have to build it up slowly over time.
Advocates of the communication-friendly approach say that some changes can be made at small cost, and that creativity in the use of funding is all important.
If we're looking at realistically what role money is going to play in how successful or not this is, then I think realistically it plays a very big role. I've never been one to accept anybody's excuse that says we can't afford to do this so that we can't do it. There are lots of things you can do with very little money, with a lot of creativity, with no money at all. The other thing is I think sometimes early years settings really need to think very carefully about how they're spending the money they do have, because I think sometimes that money isn't as well used as it might be, and that comes back to looking at what it is really important.
Elizabeth Jarman, whose report is pioneering the new thinking, has produced a toolkit which shows how the ideas can be translated into action. Links to the toolkit, which costs £10, can be found on the Teachers TV website.